It's great to be here. This is my 11th Foundry. So it's, as said, I am a bit of an addict here. And one of the reasons why it's so important is this idea of what I think we're all committed to, the instructors, of this idea of making sure that the next generation of photographers is willing to take on the responsibility of telling stories that are so important to the world. And it's why we come here every year and why we volunteer our time. And we appreciate and respect all of you for your choices to be here. And we look forward to a great week. So I've been a photographer now for 30 years. And while I'm still producing new work, I've spent like the last year and a half or so really kind of exploring the idea about memory in a variety of different projects. So I'm just going to share with you a couple of projects now during this presentation. This first one is called Shadow of Memory, and it's an exhibition that's been moving around Bosnia, where I spent a number of years covering the conflict there. And it just was in Srebrenica. If those of you not familiar with Srebrenica, Srebrenica was the place of a genocide that took place in 1995. The anniversary for that genocide was last week. And so my exhibition was there as part of the memory ceremonies that were taking place. And what I did was, having spent so much time covering the conflict in Bosnia and having been there during many important parts of that conflict, I decided to show work that had never been seen before. And I chose different themes and created these grids, which basically were surrounding these different moments. This first moment is from a place called Bijeljina, which was a small town on the eastern border of Bosnia and Serbia, where I was fortunate/unfortunate enough to document war crimes where well-armed Serbian paramilitaries executed unarmed Bosnian civilians. And so one of the photographs became very iconic, which I'll talk about in another project. And many people over the years are always asking me, like, what other photographs, what else can we see? And so I finally kind of decided to kind of put together this grid of showing these different scenes to kind of fill in these gaps of memory. One of the things that's important in Bosnia is that even though the war ended so long ago, the country is still suffering from post-traumatic stress, and the war is always part of conversations, dialogue, and so on, and there's always this great thirst to kind of understand what happened. On April 6th of 1992, the fighting began in Sarajevo. The city was divided between the Bosnian Serbs and the Bosnian Muslims, and there was a peace march, kind of the last-ditch attempt to hold the city together. And the peace march was opened fire on, and the war kind of officially began this day. So these are other images from that day. And then I kind of added different themes. This is work dealing with the life of a soldier. This is work of daily life, different things that were going on. I was one of the first photographers into the prison camps when that story broke right at the beginning of the war, where all of a sudden we were looking at images from the middle of Europe that hadn't been seen since World War II. Emaciated prisoners, skeletal prisoners, stories of executions, and so on. And so one of the things I think that's very interesting, what I've kind of realized in this kind of exploration of memory, and while for some of you it might be too early to think about, but in actuality I don't think it should be, is that kind of understanding, like, what happens with your work? How is it used from start to finish? Once we release our imagery into the world, what happens to it? And what happens to the images that you don't ever release, that are never seen? What responsibility do we have to those people and those photographs and those stories? These are photographs from the actual from Srebrenica, as the city fell. These are the survivors coming across to safety. And this is a scene from the day that the Bosnian War ended, and Sarajevo, the city, was unified once again. So the purpose of all these projects is really trying to talk about the different lives that photographs have, and what we can do as photographers in using our work. So my last monograph is a book called The Lost Rolls, which is here in case anybody's interested. I'm happy to show you a copy. And this book is kind of started out in a very kind of interesting way. I'm just going to show you a quick little trailer for it. So this book kind of started out as kind of like a really quick conversation between myself and a friend who worked at this publishing house, an on-demand book publisher called Blurb. And they wanted to do a book with me to show off their new technology and the new way that they were printing books. So they said, "Oh, do you have any ideas?" And I said to them, "Yeah, I actually have an idea. I found some film in my studio, like 20 rolls of film. I think they've been exposed. I'm not really sure what's on it. Maybe there might be something interesting there. Would you guys pay for the processing? Because it's pretty expensive now, especially in America, to process film, given how few labs there are." So they said, "Yeah, sure, go ahead." We took a look at it. "Oh, this is kind of interesting." I said, "I found another 60, 70 rolls of film. Are you guys want to check that out?" I was like, "Oh yeah, sure, we'll do that." And the next conversation was, "So I found about 140 rolls of film." And by that time I had them hooked, and they said, "Yeah, let's do it and take a look at it." And so the book actually, the project really just started as a way to kind of get my film developed. Let's just kind of do a fun thing. But in reality, and probably many of you are asked this as well, is like, I've covered a lot of very historical events, wars and liberations and important moments in different countries and so on. And people would ask me, do you have a journal? Do you write down along with your photographs and aside from the captions? I say, and my answer always was no, I don't. Why? Because I can look at a photograph and I can tell you exactly not only what's happening in that photograph, but what happened afterwards and what happened before. All of a sudden here, as I'm looking at film that basically determined was over the course of 25 years that I had never seen before developed, I actually wound up understanding that if I didn't have that immediate relationship or within a short period of time, relationship of seeing the photograph and the event, and I didn't have any metadata or properly taken notes, the film was often kind of tossed aside. I actually didn't often know who the people were in the photograph, what was happening in the photograph, and all of a sudden it became like another conversation. It became a conversation about memory, the kind of relationship between analog and digital, how with analog film, unless you have something written down, you can easily not have any dates. And it started to be kind of this very interesting exploration also about aging. As I'm getting older, I'm remembering less specifics and so on. And it started to become this whole kind of exploration of that idea. And so as I kind of were able to kind of move through this project, and I was looking at photographs that were also very interesting in the fact that they were changed by age. They were physically degrading, just like my memory was. And so I asked Becky to look at each slide negative because we would scan them and to make sure that we weren't, like a lot of the photographs damage could be changed in Photoshop, but she would say like, no, this is the actual damage due to age, and we would publish it that way. And it would kind of be that very kind of interesting thing. And then when there were photographs that I did remember, then I would write something about the photograph. And it was just kind of all these different, it was personal, it was professional, all these different kind of aspects of my life encapsulated in these rolls of film. So it was over 200 rolls of film, and of course you're asking, what an idiot, how could he possibly not develop 200 rolls of film? Well, first of all, it's over 25 years, so we're talking about less than 10 rolls a year. And the reason why I had that was often, especially in the beginning of my career, I would go shoot something, I would pitch it to a client, they would say, well, we're not interested. And I couldn't afford to process. So I put it aside. And then as I became more successful, I would get assignments. New York Times Magazine would hire me to shoot something in color, but I said, oh, this could be also cool in black and white. I'd have a third body with black and white film. I'd ask Kathy if she was interested. If she said no, that film would kind of get put aside and so on. And then film that goes through x-ray machines and so on. And then actually I wound up with all of that film. And then you have kind of these moments like where, this is a photograph of Alexandre Boulard, one of the founders of Seven, a great friend of mine who passed away a number of years ago. And all of a sudden, a picture like that just kind of appears out of nowhere, which was both this bittersweet, emotional reaction to, I think she looks amazing and beautiful and exemplifies her spirit, but at the same time brings up all sorts of sadness. And then we have photographs like these people on the left who are looking at me like I'm family. I have no idea who these people are. I don't know why they're on my film, why they're looking at me like that. And it was like really kind of shocking. And then of course I have then kind of the, you as photographers maybe like myself are invited by a friend to photograph their wedding and you never give them the film. So this is Santiago Lyon, the former director of photography at AP, and his wife Emma Daly from Human Rights Watch. And the first time they saw their wedding pictures, from me at least, was in the book. And then you have the requisite ex-girlfriend photographs, and then you have things like President Clinton and so on, all these kind of different kind of things, kind of leading to a sort of really very interesting exploration. And then you have photographs like this pair, which is of Kosovo, people displaced in Kosovo during the war. And here, these photographs, I truly regret never having them published. I like the photographs, it would have been important at the time. And here I really felt like I had failed these people by not telling their story, a story that really needed to be told. And so as I gave my book tour, I would kind of go around the United States talking to people. I would ask people, very simply, I explained what I just explained to you, and then I would say to them, do you have a roll of film that's exposed, sitting in a drawer somewhere, in a camera somewhere, that you've never processed? And more than 50% of the people would say yes. Anybody here have film that they've never processed? Okay, so even more than 50%. And so it gave me this idea. Susie mentioned it earlier about family albums, and this is kind of going a step before that, was that all of a sudden I realized that there should be this call to action, that I should try to make an attempt to get people their memories, which are locked away in these little discs, get them to be processed, get them to participate. And we created something called the Lost Rolls America, which is an archive, which is funded by Photo Wings and by Fujifilm. And Susie is a great believer and supporter of this idea about memory and photography. And so what we've done is we've created this public archive where at this point it's just connected to America. People send in their film, we process it and scan it for free. They look at a private light box, because that's always the important question was, who's going to see this film, because I have no idea what's on it. And so they're the only ones that see it. They choose 1 to 2 images, and then they write about their memory connected to the photograph. And what's really incredible is that the writing for many people is almost like therapy. They talk about their lives, these amazing things. This is a mother talking about her child who's now a teenager, how sad she is that her child is no longer as gleeful and free as she once was. This is somebody whose father had passed away, and he found all this film that his father had taken, talking about that experience. Another lost parent, or Ashley Gilbertson's son having his first ice cream, kind of all these different things. And so the idea is, we're starting with America, and then eventually we're going to expand this concept around the world, and basically trying to rescue these different memories. And I think it's a really pretty interesting thing, and it's really incredible when you read about these things that are both unifying as experiences of human beings, and then also very culturally unifying. That will be, I think the American project will look different than the Indian project, which will look different than the British project, than the Latin American project, and so on, and trying to kind of create this archive, because more and more I'm hearing stories of people that find film, they can't find a lab, or they don't even think labs exist anymore, and they throw the film away. And so you have these lost little memories just being tossed. So that's the kind of the whole Lost Worlds project with the Lost Worlds America project. If you go to lostworldsamerica.com, you can see the other hundreds of stories that are there. So in terms of America, anybody that either photographed in America or is American is welcome to participate. So anybody here is interested, let me know, and I'll make sure you get the right information to send your film in. So continuing along the lines of memory, and this is something I think that's not only important to me, but I think important to all of us as photographers, is this idea again of what happens to your work once it leaves the camera, right? You photograph for this magazine or this website or for yourself, you put it out there, and then you think it's done. But in reality, the work goes out there and touches people and has all sorts of different kind of impacts, often that you might never actually understand. And that is one of the most incredibly powerful things about what we do as photographers. This is ability, especially today, given that everybody here is on social media, Instagram, etc. So you're all publishers as well as photographers. That's a huge difference than when, even I think 10 years ago, or 11 years ago when Foundry started. It's a really big change in the way the world works. And the fact that people are interacting with your work, whether you know it or not, and learning from it and their actions and so on and so on. So in my career, which was referenced in Cheryl's introduction, I took 2 photographs, one in Panama and one in Bosnia, that had more than normal response and effect. And so I was being interviewed for a book by a professor called Lauren Walsh, who was writing a book on conflict photography, which will be out next year. And we were talking about these 2 photographs, and she asked me, like, so aside from the work being used in war crimes or the President of the United States speaking about the Panama photograph, like what else were the reactions to that photograph? And I said, I really don't know. So we decided to do this film to explore what exactly has happened, what happened over the last 25 years with these photographs. And so I'm going to show you guys the trailer for this film, which will be out next year.
En la capital panameña y mientras rodaban las cámaras de televisión.
You remember those horrible pictures of newly elected Vice President Ford, covered head to toe with blood?
Amongst the most damning evidence against Arkan is this series of pictures taken by an American photographer.
These are civilians and they are being executed in the most brutal manner by a beast, not by a human being.
Last night I ordered U.S. military forces to Panama.
This is ethnic cleansing.
Y también recuerda que es una imagen que se convierte en viral cuando ese término ni siquiera existía, porque estamos hablando de una época pre-internet.
La sangre que él tiene al lado derecho es la sangre de mi hermano, porque a él le dispararon dentro del carro. No quedó nadie detenido por la muerte de él. Y yo quiero que esas fotos que se vivió ese día queden en la historia, en el monumento, en vez de poner una placa.
The photo has impact that gave Panamanians back our democracy.
So the picture is important as a reminder this can happen again.
Moji roditelja, moj brata, moji komšija, prijatelja nema više. Ostale su samo uspomene i ova slika. Nadam se da će jednog dana da se bar iko sa ove fotografije osudi, optuži.
Kada bih htio u jednoj riječi opisati šta je rat, moja prva misao bi bila ova fotografija.